So the custom driver command executor is a new class in Selenium.net. Each browser vendor implements functionality that's accessible to Selenium, but only works for their browser. The issue is that Selenium implemented the specific browser driver classes as subclasses of the remote WebDriver class. What this means is that if you're running remotely, regardless of which browser you're using, you won't have access to the special methods that are defined in the subclass. We made sure we had a working solution for this in Selenium 4 for Ruby, Java, and .NET. Both Ruby and Java rely on a little bit of magic to make this work, whereas .NET requires you to be a little bit more explicit about it. When Selenium 4 was released, I wrote this article for Sauce Labs with code examples for the various things you can do with Selenium 4 that you couldn't do with Selenium 3 on Sauce Labs. For instance, in Chrome and Edge, you can set network conditions. In Firefox, you can take full-page screenshots. You can install and uninstall add-ons. And you can change preferences after you've already started a session. Take a look at the Java code. It's pretty straightforward. Same thing in Ruby. But in C#, it's so verbose that I hid it by default. Let's go ahead and expand this and take a look at everything that has to be written in order for this functionality to work in .NET. As you can see, the .NET code wasn't really written with this use case in mind. Jim Evans took one look at the code I was writing in order to make this work, shuddered in horror, and rewrote the functionality for Selenium 4.1 with an implementation that only requires half the steps. Here is some example code for what was needed to take a full-page screenshot in Firefox in Selenium 4.0. First, we have to figure out what endpoint the driver recognizes for this command and put it in the format that the .NET bindings requires. Then we need to create the command information with that endpoint's path. Then we have to actually add that command information to the command executor. And then we figure out what parameters the driver is expecting from that endpoint and put them into a dictionary. There are no parameters for taking a full-page screenshot, so in this case it is null. Now we get the session ID from the remote WebDriver instance, and then we can create the command for the given session and give it a name. Finally, we execute this command to get the response. Compare all of that with what is required in Selenium 4.1. You don't need to know the driver endpoint. You can just register all the custom driver commands that Firefox recognizes on the custom driver command executor. Note that while we're using the remote WebDriver instance to run this test remotely, we are using static methods on the Firefox driver class to get the information we need. You do still need to know what parameters the driver expects and put them into a dictionary, but you don't need to know the session ID, and you can execute the command you want by calling the applicable method from the Firefox driver and passing in those parameters. You can see examples of the various browser-specific methods in my website examples repository or in the article on my website. I'll put links in the description. If you're a tester using the code examples I published in Sauce Labs documentation back in October, or a company who stole it without attribution for their own documentation, please make your life easier by upgrading to Selenium 4.1 to make use of this new code.